Hello, my name is Kay Douglas, and I have gone to East Independence Church of Christ for just about my whole entire life. I think that you should know that I teach the 4 and 5-year-olds in Sunday school, and I also, outside of church, I teach middle school math, 7th grade math to be specific. So I typically spend my day with 165 12 and 13-year-olds that are very needy of my attention, and anyway, that's pretty exciting, a good way to spend the day. I have 2 kids myself, and so I've been a mom. I've been married for a very long time, and I have been blessed because I've grown up in the church. And I've always gone to church with my parents and even my grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins. And so church is truly a second home for me. And I love every bit about not just my church family, but about God and the Lord. And I learn so much every single day. With the quarantine that we've had, just like many other people, I went from a very busy schedule, a very loud schedule with lots of children with me constantly. I never sit down during a day. I make a million decisions, snap decisions in 2 or 3 seconds. And so when I get home, I don't want to have to make any more decisions. And seriously, if I get home and I sit down, then I'm pretty much done. So I have to stay standing until I've got all my home things done as well. And so the quarantine has been a time of a lot of reflection because my work now, instead of having 165 people, I just have my little family of 4 with me. And I do a lot of stuff communicating online like this, trying to answer the questions of my students and their parents and create lessons and do my job. I'm still supposed to be working from 8 to 3, which actually has been going beyond that because it's a lot to get done, trying to do it all remotely. And so I got to thinking about other examples in the Bible where people were isolated or felt isolated. And you've probably thought of these examples too as we've gone through. I wrote some notes for myself so I wouldn't forget. I thought about Noah's family in Genesis and about how they were with a community. The community was sinful. We live with sinful people. I'm a very sinful person and I feel bad about that. But I bet they had friends and people that they did with, and they were isolated by God, placed in that ark, and we know that they were in there for at least 150 days, the Bible said. That is quite the isolation. And you want to talk about the first stockading and stockpiling of food, because God told them to take every kind of food to be eaten by themselves and the animals and to store it in that ark. So I bet they had a massive run on the needs of toilet paper and stuff for their ark experience. Then I also thought about Joseph and how he was isolated a couple of different times in his life. He was isolated in the pit, he was isolated in jail, and then probably felt pretty isolated from his family as he was working for Pharaoh. And then I also thought about Daniel when he was placed in that lion's den overnight. I bet that was terrifying. And then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their time in that fiery furnace, which would have been scary, was very short-lived. But excuse me, also would have been very scary as they were going on. And then I thought about Jonah being thrown overboard. That would have been terrifying. And then swallowed up by the giant fish and being in that fish for 3 days. And I thought about Mary. And most people might not think about Mary, but I bet in her circumstances, to find herself pregnant and unwed, that was a pretty isolating experience for her, I would imagine. It doesn't say that exactly in the Bible, but those are things that I would guess would be isolating. I noticed that in Noah's situation, the Bible says several times that Noah did as God commanded. And I also know that Daniel did as God commanded, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did as God commanded, and Joseph did as God commanded, and Mary did as God commanded. They all trusted God in their weird, isolated situations. And in their trust in God, they trusted him implicitly. They didn't question, they just did as he commanded and then trusted what he said and what his purpose was going to be. And then they prayed. Now, Jonah was the one that was a little bit backwards because Jonah did not do as God commanded, and Jonah did not trust God at first. But once he got in the belly of the fish, he definitely changed his ways and started his prayer. But all of them also prayed to God. And that lets me know that in these circumstances, I should be praying also all the time. And even Jesus, when he went to that Garden of Gethsemane right before he was crucified, he was praying to God, and God provided comfort. And in fact, God has provided comfort for me in some different verses. And you probably have these same verses in your mind, maybe or maybe not. I always am comforted in Jonah's situation, not Jonas, sorry, in Joseph's situation in Genesis 50:20, where Joseph says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is being done, the saving of many lives." And so he sees the big picture, and it might be hindsight 2020 kind of thing, but he sees this wasn't for bad. This was for good. We're saving many lives. You also probably are very familiar with the verse of Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, for hope and in the future and good things that God is promising us. In Romans 8:28, he tells us all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And so those verses bring me comfort in times like this. And so I think the Bible, that's just three quick examples. The Bible is full of comforting verses about how do not be afraid. The Lord is going to be with you. Fear not, for I'm with you. I will comfort you. I will uphold you with the right hand of my righteousness. Verses like that. And then in Philippians 4, recently my husband, Rob, has had colorectal cancer, and that blindsided us. It was totally unexpected. And it shook our world, and Rob said to our family, "We will cry today and be sad today, and then we will be done with that, and we will trust in the Lord." And that's what our family did. We cried exactly one day, and then we got on with it, and we fought the battle of cancer. And so Philippians 4 became verses that were very comforting to me, and they bolstered my spirit nonstop. It started off by telling me, "Hey, you need to rejoice. Rejoice in all things." And that was pretty tough. And then it said, "Be anxious about nothing." And I would say, "What? Not even this, Lord?" And the answer was always, "Not even this. We are going to be anxious about nothing." And then with prayer and petition. And so I had to look up petition, and I know that I was just on God's ear, on my knees, talking to him all the time, petitioning him for things for Rob and for my family and for my students at school and that whole entire situation. But it wasn't just prayer and petition, it was prayer and petition with thanksgiving. And so I had to remember that when I am praying, I needed to have a thankful heart about every little thing. And the promise of peace that passes all understanding is absolutely true, because when I remembered to not be anxious about anything, not even this, and to rejoice about everything, and to pray and petition with thanksgiving in my heart, we were peaceful in our house throughout that whole entire ordeal, through multiple surgeries, chemo and radiation, and job situations. It was actually a very peaceful time in my life. And I think part of that is because we went on in that Philippians 4 chapter and we did replacement behaviors. Well, if I'm not going to be anxious, if I'm not going to worry, what am I going to think about? And it told me in Philippians 4 to think about things that are true and noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable. If it's excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. When I felt those little niggling thoughts getting into my head, I'd be like, nope, I'm thinking about this instead. Nope, I'm thinking about the dogs. Nope, I'm thinking about the lake. Nope, I'm thinking about camping. Nope, I'm thinking about this situation at school. And I would have to stop myself physically and verbally out loud. Nope, you're not thinking about that. We are going to be thankful and we are going to rejoice. What can we be rejoicing about today? So I gave myself replacement behaviors, and that was helpful. And finally, I think through all of that, God taught me what Paul learned. I learned the secret of being content. Whether it was we were in need or we had plenty, the secret of being content was Jesus. Jesus helped us get through all of that stuff. Recently, our school district in this quarantine situation encouraged us to take part in the Power of Positive Summit. And so I did so just because it was suggested, and I am so thankful that I did. There were 30 speakers that talked to us about tips of how to be positive and just to keep a positive perspective in all situations. And even though they were 30 people from different walks of life, there were three constants that came up in their talks. They said, you need to have God in your life, be God-centered. And the second one was also a G word, you need to have gratitude. which is what we were just talking about in Philippians, be thankful for everything in all situations. And then the third thing, they encourage us to be generous, to look to see what can we do or help others, to have a servant's heart, which that's very much what God would want us to do also. So I really appreciated that they encouraged us to be godly, to be after God's heart, to have gratitude, and to be generous with others. I know that when I look back on this time, that there will be lots of happy memories and good blessings that come from my forced quarantine, the first amount of time that I've been having to spend with my family, with Rob, my husband, and with my two kids, Ethan and Laurie. I know that there will be blessings from my Zoom meetings that I've been doing with my sister, Sandy Hinckley, and the other math teachers online. I know that there will be blessings when I think about the walks that I've taken and how I've had to stand on the sidewalk to talk to my grandmas on their porches, and my parents on their porches, and my aunts on their porches. This will have happy memories for me, even though right now it is very uncomfortable and I just want to be free. But I think about Mary and what it says about Mary, and about, I wrote this down too because I wanted to get it right, about how um, it says that Mary treasured all these things and pondered them in her heart. Now, it was talking about Mary pondering things about Jesus, but I still think it's important for us to ponder. I'm going to ponder these things and treasure them in my heart. And pondered simply means to think about carefully, especially before we make any decisions or we reach a conclusion. So before I decide if this is a good or a bad thing, I'm going to be pondering this in my heart. I got a feeling I'm going to see a lot of good that comes from this, and I hope that you do too. So I hope you have a good day. I hope that you're encouraged, and I hope that you have comforting verses that you can fall back on, that you rely on God, that you are grateful and generous, and that you ponder things in your heart.